On Monday, the Democrats outlined what this election is about. It's about a fair deal for today's working families, about who everyday people can count on to stand up for them, to make life more affordable, to ensure women and men have a fair day's pay for a hard day's work, to remove barriers to a good education, a productive future, to improve public health care, and to fight for a clean environment for our children. That's what this election is about. Today, I want to outline who this election is about. It's about hardworking families, people like Mr. and Mrs. Asnadoga and their son, Burak. Burak is a child with autism. Autism is a complex neurological disorder that makes it very difficult for children to communicate. There is hope for children with autism. It's called intensive behavioral intervention treatment, or IBI treatment. It is a widely hailed treatment that can make a very big difference for a child with autism. There is, however, one significant barrier to IBI treatment. IBI treatment can cost a family $5,000 a month to provide it for their child. Now I said, I want you to know Nancy Morrison. Nancy Morrison is the NDP candidate for York Simcoe. What's of interest is how she became the NDP candidate for York Simcoe. Nancy is also a mother. Her son Sean is a child with autism. Nancy Morrison is well known, and for some time has been well known, as a very resourceful advocate for children with autism. In 2003, during the election, Nancy wrote Dalton McGuinty a letter. She asked Mr. McGuinty if he could state his position with respect to IBI treatment and services for children with autism. Mr. McGuinty replied. And I want to read to you this letter because it makes some very specific promises. First of all, the letter is accompanied by a note from a McGuinty policy analyst who says, please find attached a letter from Dalton McGuinty in response to your request for information regarding the Ontario Liberal Party's stance on autism services. Feel free to distribute this letter to other interested parties. In other words, Nancy was told, feel free to distribute this letter to all kinds of parents who have children with autism. Feel free to distribute it to many other parents in the autism community. Nancy did that when she received the letter. But I want to quote the letter. Dear Ms. Morrison, thank you kindly for your email requesting information on the Ontario Liberal Party's position on IBI treatment for autistic children. I appreciate the vital issues you've raised and will be pleased to address them at this time. The letter goes on. Among some of the most vulnerable members of our society, these children need and deserve our help and support. And like other children, they deserve every opportunity for future success. Sadly, as you and many other families are experiencing firsthand, far too few autistic children in our province are getting the help and support they so desperately need. But then also it goes on, I also believe that the lack of government-funded IBI treatment for autistic children over 6 is unfair and discriminatory. The Ontario Liberals support extending autism treatment beyond the age of 6. In government, my team and I will work with clinical directors, parents, teachers, and school boards to devise a feasible way in which autistic children in our province can get the support and treatment they need. That includes children over the age of 6. He goes on, he says, yours truly, Dalton McGuinty. It sounds as if Mr. McGuinty was very committed to ensuring that children with autism would receive IBI treatment. It sounds as if he was very committed to ensuring that this was available in schools. It sounds as if he was very committed to ensuring that even children over age 6 would receive IBI treatment. Well, that was before the election. That was before the election. After the election, what we saw from Mr. McGuinty was a complete about-face. Instead of keeping the promises he made to Nancy Morrison and all the other parents of children with autism, Mr. McGuinty fought these parents and their children with every tactic at his disposal. First of all, there was no increased funding for autism services. So parents, feeling desperate, did the only thing they could do. They were forced to go to the Human Rights Commission, and they were forced to go to court. Mr. McGuinty and his government spent literally millions of dollars dragging these parents through the court, fighting them at every step so that Mr. McGuinty could break the promise that he made to provide IBI treatment and other services for children with autism. When Mr. McGuinty lost one of the court battles, his government was forced to finally announce some funding for IBI treatment. But even those announcements and re-announcements took a very deceptive twist. With much fanfare, the McGuinty government announced funding, but months later, when our advocate for children with autism, Shelley Martell, who happens to be my wife, months later when she issued a Freedom of Information request to see where the money actually went, she was surprised to discover that $59 million of the money that had been announced for IBI services for children with autism didn't go there at all. It was diverted to other services. Finally, when she wanted to know just how much the government had spent, the McGuinty government had spent fighting the parents in court, she had to submit another FOI request. The McGuinty government blocked that FOI request with every tactic they could find. When finally the Information and Privacy Commissioner said the government had to disclose the information, the McGuinty government even took Shelley Martell to court to try to hide from the public the fact that the McGuinty government had spent $2.4 million dragging parents like these through the courts to try to defeat them and to facilitate Mr. McGuinty breaking his promise. What does this tell you? Well, I think what it tells you is that Mr. McGuinty seems to feel no awkwardness, seems to feel no guilt in making promises before the election, in telling parents who are desperately fighting for their kids, circulate my promise everywhere, make sure other parents know of it, and then immediately after the election, not only walking away from the promise, but doing everything in his power to fight the very parents to whom the promise was made. Because of Mr. McGuinty's broken promises, and there's a long list of broken promises with respect to children with autism, but because of that, there are 1,100 children in Ontario languishing on waiting lists, waiting for IBI and other autism services. And it's forcing families, like the Aslan-Boga family, to sell their home to raise the money they need to pay for their son's autism treatment. That is completely unacceptable. No parent should have to do that. No parent should especially have to do that after the Premier of the province gave them and all other parents a written promise that this was not going to happen again. So I ask, who is this campaign about? It's about hardworking families like these. The Aslan-Bogas, the Nancy Morrisons, who Dalton McGuinty took advantage of, who Dalton McGuinty gave a promise to, and then did everything in his power to frustrate them, to defeat them.